Moin, ihr wunderbare Menschen des Interwebs. Ich begrüße euch ganz herzlich zurück zu meinem Let's Play von The Great Ace-Attorney Chronicles. Im letzten Part haben wir hier Soseki-san kennengelernt, ein sehr interessanter Zeitgenosse, der unser Mandant ist für den nächsten Fall. Und wir wollten uns jetzt noch einmal umgucken bei dem Tatort, bei dem sich hoffentlich nun etwas geändert hat. Naja, guck mal an. Da ist er ja, unser Inspektor. What's the Japanese delegation doing here?
Oh, Inspector Gregson.
This isn't on the tourist trail, as I'm fairly sure you're well aware.
Yes, of course. We are here to investigate.
So you've been to the Holden cells then. What do you make of the criminal?
He's not a criminal, as you put it, Inspector. He's a suspect.
We will see about that. You Japanese like to stick together, I suppose. Well, do what you will. It doesn't bother me. The bloke's in court tomorrow, whatever happens, and that verdict's a foregone conclusion. Stone cold air of rejection.
Take heart, London at this time of year is full of stone cold air.
That makes it worse somehow.
Tell me about Scotland Yard, Inspector. Ever since I read about it in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, I've been fascinated by the place.
The Yard is the most sophisticated policing organization you will find anywhere in the world, ma'am.
Oh, and you know, I've always dreamt of wearing a real Bobby's helmet.
It does make them look the part. Seeing that policeman there with his helmet on, you certainly get the sense that this is a man who will take no nonsense in his duty of protecting the city.
Oh yes, doesn't he look wonderful?
Being a London Bobby is hard going, I can tell you.
Oh, really?
First thing in the morning, you know what he does. Goes round and rouses all the laborers on his beat so they can get off to work.
What? He wakes people up?
Yup, raps on their windows with a long pole. Did it myself, going back a bit.
I had no idea.
The Bobby works for the people of the town. It's just another one of his duties. After that, he starts tirelessly patrolling the streets all day long. He has to cover 20 miles a day. That's the regulation distance. I can't really imagine how far that is, but it sounds like a long way.
Let me see. 20 miles. That's approximately the distance from Tokyo to Yokohama.
On foot? That's definitely taking things a step too far. And when it gets dark, of course, he has the important job of lighting all the gas street lamps.
Oh my.
And I suppose in between all of those duties, Bobbies are expected to investigate cases as well.
And chase after criminals trying to evade the law.
I'm not sure you could call it in between exactly, more alongside, but yes. They are expected to handle those jobs as well. We do have men kneeling over from time to time, I admit.
I'd always dreamt of wearing one of those helmets, as I said. But it's with a heavy heart that I shall have to relinquish that dream to you, Mr. Naruhodo.
Your heavy heart will be my heavy head if you do. It happened at around 5 in the evening 2 days ago, just here on that open bit of pavement. The victim, a young woman, was stabbed with a blade from behind. Is it right that the lady is still unconscious now? You mentioned that she's being treated in hospital. I never said she was a lady. Truth is, unless she comes around pretty smartish, we won't be able to find out much about her at all. I suppose that means they haven't been able to take a statement from her, of course. Here's a map of the local area I happen to have on me. You can take it if you want.
Really? Are you sure?
It's your policy to give lawyers defending suspects the odd bit of information to go on. I haven't actually accepted the job yet, but still.
Thank you, Inspector. We gratefully accept.
The local map has been entered into the court records. Okay. Anyway, as far as we know, there was no one else on the scene other than the victim and your fellow countryman. So who did it, do you think? Not much of a head-scratcher, is it? Well, I know Mr. Natsume is also claiming not to have seen anyone else around, but just because he didn't see anyone, it doesn't mean we can be sure that nobody else was present. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but we most certainly can be sure.
How?
Because, ma'am, the precise moment of the stabbing didn't go unnoticed.
What?
We have two very reliable witnesses, no less. It was a typical foggy London day, and your client obviously didn't see them.
There were witnesses now?
Who are these witnesses, Inspector? A fellow and his wife, and the man's one of the most reliable and respected citizens in all of London. He's a copper from Scotland Yard.
A policeman? That might change things. And this policeman just happened to be there at the exact moment the woman was attacked?
Nothing peculiar about that, ma'am. Part and parcel of being a bobby, catching them bang in the act and all that.
Do you think it might be possible for us to ask that policeman a few questions?
Be my guest. You can ask him what you like. In court tomorrow. I have no doubt he will be summoned as a witness, so that will give you something to look forward to.
That's that then. He's got no intention of letting us meet the man beforehand, it seems. Policeman witnessed the incident? As your judicial assistant, I must warn you that this could make our job very difficult indeed.
Yes, as a non-judicial assistant, I could have warned me of that too.
Oh yes, one more thing, Inspector.
What?
The person who led you to the suspect. I hear that was Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes? What are you bringing him up for?
Was it something I said? The color has drained from his cheeks.
Who did you hear that name from?
Oh, well, it was Mr. Natsume who mentioned it. He said that Mr. Holmes was with the police when they entered his lodgings. I'm sure it was the result of one of Mr. Holmes' inspirational great deductions.
Fiddle faddle. The man's an amateur, and I'm getting sick and tired of him showing his mug everywhere. I don't know where he gets his information from, but he turns up at the scene of the crime, wanders around, spouting incomprehensibly rubbish, and before he claims to have solved the case.
Yes, he's quite astounding, isn't he? He is a great help to Scotland Yard, though, isn't he?
Gibbly gobbly. Ever seen this before?
Oh, yes, that's Rand's magazine. A wonderful publication in which the adventures of Sherlock Holmes appears.
Yes, well, that wonderful publication, as you put it, sees fit to include several of the Yard's detectives in its stories. And the so-called great detective makes a mockery of all of us. If you ask anyone at the Yard, it's a misadventure to be included in any Sherlock Holmes tales at all.
Well, I suppose there is an element of that.
We work our socks off, every one of us, only to be frumped by the public thanks to that obnoxious detective. The man's as dangerous to us at Scotland Yard as he is to all our criminals.
That can't really be true, can it, Inspector?
Clearly the great detective and the police have a complex relationship. That twitchy Japanese bloke goes on trial tomorrow. Are you going to defend him or not? Well, makes no difference to me, but I will just say this. No London lawyer worth his salt would touch that case with a bark pole.
Because the prosecution is being handled by the Reaper of the Bailey, you mean?
There's no way to save the man now. It's a waste of time trying. It is all a bit strange, though.
Sorry?
The Reaper, he hasn't appeared in court once for a good few years now.
Yes, we did hear something to that effect.
And the only people he usually bothers with are the real scum, the master criminals, the violent ones. Master criminals? The violent ones? That's right, he handpicks his victims, only deals with those guaranteed to go to the gallows for the sins. But Mr. Natsume wouldn't hang for what he's accused of, surely? That's just my point, Sunshine. Yes, the young woman was stabbed, but it didn't kill her. Couldn't even say the intent was there. So, this isn't the sort of case I would be expecting the Reaper to want to sink his teeth into, for want of a better phrase. Well, it's not exactly a minor infraction, is it? No, there's got to be more to it. Some reason he's taking an interest.
Really? What sort of reason, Inspector?
You think I can tell what's going on inside the head of that Lord of Darkness? You will have to ask him yourself at tomorrow's trial.
Are we really going to have to face the Reaper again? The Lord of Darkness, as you put it?
Well, I don't think we're going to get any more useful information out of the detective.
Mr. Naruhodo, can I make a suggestion?
Oh, yes, what is it?
Well, it seems to me that we must speak with him about this.
By him, do you mean Mr. Sholmes?
Yes, Mr. Sherlock Sholmes, exactly.
Look at those shining eyes. You can't wait, can you? Well, Mr. Natsume did blame Mr. Sholmes for all of this, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He really did. Which makes him an involved party in the case. Are you just going to ignore that? I hope not. I assure you, it's not simply my selfish desire to meet Mr. Sholmes again.
The trouble is, we have no idea of the man's address, even...
It's Baker Street.
How do you know that?
It's in the stories, of course. 221B Baker Street, the most famous address in the world.
Oh, I see. Well, there's nothing to stop us from going, I suppose. We would better try to find our way there before Susato-san gets any more excited and unpredictable.
I will summon a carriage!
So, we're to have a reunion already, with the great detective Mr. Sherlock Sholmes. Okay, dann würde ich einmal ganz kurz in den Court Record gucken und würde mir sehr, sehr gerne die Map einmal anschauen. Gut, also, hier ist dieser Tatort. Ich gehe mal stark davon aus, dass das noch wichtig wird. Und hier kannst du überall durchlaufen. Oder, nee, das ist ein Haus. Soll das jetzt hier ein Haus darstellen? Das soll ein Haus darstellen, oder? Lass mich mal nochmal den Tatort angucken. Ja, ich schätze mal, dass das jetzt die Gebäude darstellt. Ich meine, hier hast du einen Durchgang auf jeden Fall. Also hier kannst du durchlaufen. Und auf der anderen Seite sieht das hier hinten eventuell nach einem Durchgang aus. Bin ich mir nicht so sicher. Ich schätze mal, das wird jetzt auf der Karte eingezeichnet sein. Ich hatte jetzt auf die rechte Seite mehr geachtet, aber da kannst du eben hier hinten durch diesen Torbogen, wie es aussieht, durchlaufen. Gut, ich würde sagen, Mr. Sherlock Sholmes, wir kommen. So, this is where the great detective makes his living. It feels surreal to be here somehow. Is it as described in the stories, Miss Susato? Susato-san?
Many famous cases have been solved here in this very room.
I suppose they must have been, yes. I've never read the stories, so it's hard to get quite as excited about it as she seems to be.
The detective chases the villain relentlessly as he disappears into the fog down an unlit London street. Ah, the thrill of it, the romanticism. Can't you feel your heart thumping in your chest? Can't you, Mr. Naruhodo?
Oh, I suppose I can, yes.
So, if you don't mind, I will just stand here and soak up the atmosphere for a while longer. Please don't mind me.
She's obsessed. Well, looks like our detective friend isn't home at present. Excuse me, is anybody home? Oh, do we have a visitor?
Hello, is it a big new case for Mr. Sholmes?
Hallo. Ah, ich hatte recht, als wir die Kleine zum Schluss gesehen haben, dass die was mit Sherlock Holmes zu tun hat. Ja, weil nämlich die Brille eben bei ihm so ähnlich aussah. Aren't you...
Oh, how rude of me. I will go and make some tea at once.
I'm sure it's the same girl. Miss Susato, did you see the girl who was just here?
Oh yes, isn't it truly extraordinary? To think that the King of Bohemia came to this very room to ask Mr. Sholmes to take on his case?
The King of what?
King Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, of course.
Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Forget the adventures of Sherlock Holmes for a moment and look over there.
There's tea brewed and I have a freshly baked cake as well.
Gott, der Soundtrack von ihr, ich finde ihn irgendwie, ich finde ihn irgendwie cool.
Oh, it's you.
I knew it. Susato-san recognizes her too.
Oh, there you are. And taking it with you as well. I was looking forward to the trial run of my experimental smoke grenade launcher. Oh, good day to you. I'm, well, the inventor, I suppose, of that machine.
It's the girl who turned up at the end of Mr. McGillet's trial in the defendant's antechamber.
I've never met a lawyer from the Far East before. Poor you having to get straight to work when you've only just arrived in London.
Oh, yes, it was challenging.
Well, try this tea. It's my special blend, you know.
Oh, thank you. Is tea supposed to look that color?
Oh my, what a fragrant yet mellow flavor. Hooray, it's a winner! I tried blending different leaves designed to alleviate fatigue, you see. You must be exhausted after your long voyage here, and you have another ticklish trial tomorrow. Oh, and you're to defend a Japanese man. I do wish you lots and lots of luck.
Did Mr. Sholmes tell you about us by any chance?
Oh, you know Hurley, do you?
Hurley? Mr. Sholmes? To you, surely?
Mr. Sholmes was a fellow passenger on the boat that brought us to Great Britain, you see. Was he really? Well, I had no idea. I'm afraid Hurley's out on an errand again today, even though he's just returned from overseas.
Wait a minute. We met this girl for the first time ever yesterday after the trial, and only briefly at that. How on earth does she know so much about us? Did she deduce all those things, do you think?
And perhaps more to the point, why is she here in Mr. Sholmes' suit? Oh, silly me, I haven't introduced myself, have I? It's a great pleasure to meet you both. My name is Iris Wilson. I live here together with Hurley.
Ah, Iris, is it? What a lovely name.
What?
What's the matter?
No, wait, this can't be. Did you say that your name is Wilson?
What's the matter with Susato-san? Why is she so flustered all of a sudden?
Yes, that's right. And what are your names?
Oh, I'm Ryunosuke Naruhodo, a lawyer from Japan.
Oh, sorry. I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant, Susato Mikotoba. It's wonderful to meet you. Lovely. Susie and Runo. Got it. Susie?
And Runo? There's more to this girl than meets the eye. I have so many questions for her, I don't know where to start.
Yes, and so do I.
Dann würde ich mal sagen, legen wir mit den Fragen los. It was you that we ran into yesterday, wasn't it? At the Old Bailey.
Yes, that's right. You were ever so helpful. Thank you so much. Oh no, not at all. I'm so sorry we couldn't have been more welcoming.
So, at the time, we did have a rather large gun pointed at us.
Like this? Oh, thinking back now, you left with Miss Lestrade in tow, didn't you?
Oh yes, that awkward witness, Gina Lestrade.
Oh, Ginny? Yes, she's a professional pickpocket.
So, we found out.
It was very naughty of her to pinch my invention like that.
Are you referring to the trial disrupting gun-like contraption?
Exactly, so I followed her, you see, to get it back. Perhaps I should think about fitting a self-destruct mechanism in my inventions.
This girl is dangerous.
Anyway, I brought Ginny back here after that, so she could apologize to my trusty technician.
Sorry, your technician?
Hurley, of course, silly.
Hurley?
Yes, Herlock Sholmes. We live here together.
I had no idea the great detective had such an interesting young daughter.
Daughter? Not likely.
What?
I wouldn't call him Hurley if he was my father, would I?
Well then, what is your relationship with Mr. Sholmes?
Well, I expect you've found out that lodgings of any kind in London are very expensive. So the solution is to share the cost with a partner, a roommate.
You are roommates?
I hope you don't mind me asking, Iris, but how old are you? 10, and last this year.
Well, what if your mother and father?
Oh no, they are not around.
Oh, I see. I wonder what the story is there.
Oh yes, there's something I must ask you. Of course, go ahead, Susie. I am a very great fan of the adventure of Sherlock Holmes and... Oh, you have a copy of Rand's magazine? Yes, I read every issue. It's delivered all the way to Japan on a ship. Oh, this is so exciting. My stories are being read on the other side of the world.
My stories?
That's right. Hurley is always solving such amazing cases, you see, and he tells me all about them. They really are quite fascinating. It would be such a shame if I was the only one who ever heard them, don't you think? Goodness. Last night, he was telling me all about a new case he just solved on a steamship traveling from a faraway land. So I was just in the middle of typing up the manuscript for the next issue before you came.
So, you are the author?
Yes, I will let you in on a secret if you like. I'm going to call this latest adventure the Speckled Band.
The Speckled Band? That's certainly very familiar.
Of course, I always change one or two details in the stories here and there. This time, I had the idea of making a venomous snake be the cause of all the trouble.
Oh, that was Mr. Sholmes' first thought as well, actually.
Yes, and of course I know that a snake might not be a credible fit for the facts of the case exactly, but it's a story. Some poetic license is justified to make it more thrilling, I think, don't you? So, do you mean to say, are the stories about Mr. Sholmes that are published in Rand's magazine all written by me? Yes, on my wonderful and very modern typewriter. But all the stories I've ever read are written by a doctor of medicine, Dr. John H. Wilson.
Susato-san's getting more and more worked up.
Ah, yes, that's me. I mean, my name really is Wilson. But what about the doctor of medicine part? That's all true too. I'm a doctor of medicine.
No, at 10 years old?
At 10 years old.
Well, that's quite incredible.
But Dr. Wilson is an English gentleman. Ah, yes. I did alter the setting slightly for the stories to be more compelling. Well, it sounds a little strange, doesn't it? A great detective with a 10-year-old girl in tow. I suppose it does, yes.
Poor Susato-san, she looks like her whole world has just fallen apart. About before.
Yes, what's on your mind, Runo? Do tell me.
How did you know? That I was a lawyer, and we would just arrived in London, I mean.
Yes, oh, and that we have a difficult trial tomorrow. How did you know all of that? Oh, that's what you mean. Please, tell us how you did it. Explain every detail. Of course, I would be delighted. Also, there's really no mystery. Now, let's begin. Iris Wilson is proud to present her logic and reasoning spectacular. First of all, I knew already that you were a lawyer, Runo. After all, I met you yesterday at the Old Bailey in the defendant's antechamber.
But you also said that we only just arrived in London. How did you know that?
I observed the passport and travel ticket protruding from your breast pocket.
Oh.
So I was reasonably confident that you must have only just arrived in the country. And on top of that, you accepted a case against the particular prosecutor, telling me you were unaware of London's court affairs.
The Reaper of the Bailey? I walked right into that one, didn't I?
Then I noticed a red ink stamp on the back of Susie's hand. You were given that when you visited the local prison to meet with a suspect, weren't you, earlier today? They use those stamps to keep a close eye on comings and goings, you see. I didn't realize. And the red stamp is only used for people visiting foreign inmates. So that told me that even though you had only yesterday concluded the trial of Magnus McGilded, the two of you had already had cause to visit a foreign inmate at a local prison. However, neither of you was wearing a particularly sad expression on your face, so I concluded that the prisoner was unlikely to be a friend or a relative. That led me to believe that you must have accepted a new case.
I see.
But how could you have known that the trial is tomorrow? Well, having barely been home for a few hours yesterday, Hurley solved yet another case. It's obviously amused him. He told me that he caught a Japanese man who was bawling and trembling.
A Japanese man? Well, clearly that must have been Mr. Natsume.
Now, Runo has that fancy Japanese sword. And I think your outfit is called a kimono, isn't it, Susie? Well, anyway, it was clear to me that you both come from Japan yourself. So I put two and two together and decided you must be defending the Japanese man Hurley caught. And there was only one conclusion those facts could lead me to. You both came here to ask Hurley about the case.
Wow, die Kleine ist ja sogar schlauer als Sherlock. Zumindest war das jetzt einmal eine Feststellung, die tatsächlich komplett stimmt.
There's a note on the mantelpiece that says the man's trial will be tomorrow. Hurley is always stabbing his notes with a knife, you know. He is silly. And that's all there was to it, really. Thank you for listening. I'm Iris Wilson, and that was one of my great deductions. Well, was it a winner? Were my deductions correct?
They were spot on.
That was amazing, Iris. Truly great deduction.
You even managed to certain something of Mr. Sholmes' delivery.
Oh, well, I was just copying Hurley's style for that. This is really very good news. You could tell us all about the case involving the Japanese man. You will, won't you, Iris? Please.
So, yesterday, Mr. Sholmes apprehended a Japanese man, you were saying.
Yes. Hurley had just arrived back in London after his sea voyage, but the police were waiting for him at the railway station to take him directly to the crime scene.
The Red Detective is a popular man, it seems.
Apparently, a woman was stabbed on a quiet street somewhere in town. There were witnesses who had seen a short, shifty-looking, stooped man running away from the scene.
A short, shifty-looking stooped man? Mr. Natsume, beyond any doubt. Suzuki-san said that he didn't see anybody else on the street at all, but it seems there were witnesses after all.
Hurley used his great detective powers to determine the man's address. It was a lodging room very nearby. He went directly there with the police, and what did they find? A short, shifty-looking stooped man shivering in fear.
Mr. Sholmes' great detection certainly hit the mark that time. Ich meine, ich kann mir einfach vorstellen, wenn da Schnee lag, ist man einfach den Fußspuren gefolgt, oder? Die vom Tatort wegführen? Die müssen ja noch relativ frisch dann gewesen sein.
Of course he did. He's a great detective.
Still, that means the incident occurred only 2 days ago. Surely tomorrow is too soon for the trial, isn't it?
Definitely. We have no time to investigate properly. Hurley says that London is rife with crime. Scotland Yard is doing its best, but they can't stay on top of it, apparently. Oh dear, I hadn't realized the situation was so dire. That's why they can't afford to spend too much time investigating cases and trying the criminals in court. Staff and money are both short. Crimes are usually pinned on the first suspicious person.
That's terrible.
I suppose it's the harsh reality of the workings of the world's greatest justice system.
Das zeigt mir eigentlich nur, wie unfassbar schlecht dieses System ist. I suppose it is, but in that case, I don't hold out much hope for Suzuki-san. Thank you for answering so many of our questions, Iris. This has been very informative.
Oh, you're most welcome. I've had so much fun.
Do you happen to know where Mr. Sholmes is at the moment? As you guessed, we would like to ask him some questions about this case as well.
Well, I expect Hurley is still investigating the scene.
Of the case involving Mr. Natsume, you mean?
Yes, Mr. Natsume. Hurley said he was going to the man's lodgings. If you leave now, you will probably catch him there.
Iris, do you know where those lodgings are?
Well, I imagine the police are still investigating the scene of the crime themselves, aren't they? Did you happen to come across a detective by the name of Gregson when you were there?
Yes, we know Inspector Gregson.
Ah, goody. In that case, give Grexy this from me, would you? If you do that, I'm sure he will tell you what you want to know.
What is this?
A 5-shilling piece and a postcard, it seems.
Postcard. Okay.
It reads, "Tell the gentleman in black whatever he wants to know. I trust it won't be a problem." Gosh, this will make the inspector help us, will it?
Well, thank you, Iris. We will give it a try.
Good luck then. I'm going to return to writing my manuscript, The Speckled Band.
Manuscript.
And I will be making more special blends of tea, so come back again soon.
We would be delighted. Thank you so much, Iris.
Well, Mr. Naruhodo, it's back to the scene of the crime.
So, somewhat dubious that they would exert any influence over the man of Scotland Yard at all. We headed back to the scene with Iris' curious note and one of the world's heaviest silver coins in hand. To be continued. Ja, also ich muss sagen, ich finde Iris sehr, sehr toll. Ich finde, sie ist ein sehr, sehr toller Charakter. Macht auch sehr, sehr Spaß, ihr zuzuhören und mit ihr zu reden. Sie ist auch überhaupt nicht, also dafür, dass sie 10 ist, halt überhaupt nicht ihrem Alter entsprechend. Sehr, sehr reif und ja, ich fand auch ihre Schlussfolgerung sehr cool, weil bei Herlock ist es ja immer eigentlich, also zumindest jetzt, was wir mitbekommen hatten im zweiten Fall, war das ja komplett daneben und falsch und wir mussten das ja dann korrigieren. Und jetzt bei ihr war die Schlussfolgerung halt wirklich spot on, korrekt dargelegt, mit allen Hinweisen wirklich richtig entschlüsselt und wiedergegeben. Fand ich cool. Und im nächsten Part werden wir dann vermutlich Herlock wiedersehen und ein paar Worte mit ihm reden. Hier gibt es jetzt aber erstmal einen Cut. Ich bedanke mich wie immer ganz herzlich fürs Zusehen. Hoffe, ihr hattet Spaß. Und wenn ihr mögt, sehen wir uns sehr, sehr gerne im nächsten Part wieder. Bis dahin, ciao!